What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Stand Up and Laugh audiobook / podcast. As always, I am your host and stand-up comic and author of the zine Stand Up and Laugh, Angelo Gingerelli. On this episode, we're breaking into the top 10 ways to be an asset to a comedy scene. So we're talking about things you could do to be a valuable and valued member of whatever comedy scene you're in or starting. So things we're going to talk about this episode involve no comedy beef. Just beefing with other comedians is silly, and we'll talk about why a lot in the audiobook segment. How to be welcoming to newcomers, right? Going to an open mic is terrifying for some people. There's no reason for you to make it harder if you're just a little bit more established. And then always support other comics and never heckle. At the end of the day, we're all on the same team, and you being that guy or that woman in the audience is not the way to move and advance your career or the scene whatsoever. When we get past the audiobook segments, you have not one, not two, but 3 interviews. They're not differentiated in any way, but you'll see as we go through the interviews, each person has a very distinct voice. We usually tell who is who. But we're going to call this the Jersey Shore All-Star episode. We got 3 comics that have been performing forever at the Jersey Shore and come at the game from 3 different angles. So I thought it was really valuable to keep all 3 interviews on pretty much intact and get as much information for these men and women as possible. First up, we got Joe Borzotta. He has owned bars, he has owned art galleries, he's a visual artist. He is currently my partner in Ugly Pancake Productions. You can find out more anywhere online or at our Instagram account, Ugly Pancake Comedy. But he's seen the entertainment industry and the local live music, comedy, art world from so many different angles, and he brings a ton to the table. And I want to get a lot of info from him. Right after that, we're going to interview Eric Hollerbach. Eric has been in the New Jersey comedy scene. He's lived in New York City. He's lived in Los Angeles. He's currently in Austin, Texas. And he kind of brings a lot to the table as far as being a member of 4 different emerging comedy scenes. And we kind of compare and contrast how Jersey is different than Austin, different than New York, different than LA. So a really cool interview there. And then we got Mollie Sperduto. Mollie's a good comedy friend of mine. We worked together a ton of times over the years. She runs Ginger Ninja Productions, and she's really into doing fundraisers for local groups. So I've done shows with her and Ginger Ninja for Boy Scout groups and different fundraisers and music foundations, and they really do a great job of presenting most of the time family-friendly comedy that raises a lot of money for good causes. And she's going to talk to us about how do you start approaching those organizations, what do you need, how do you handle setting up a room that might be a basketball gym, or it might be just a big empty banquet hall, and turn that into a comedy club so that people go in there, feel comfortable, have a good time. It's a safe, friendly environment, and people feel like donating money to these good causes. So again, just to rehash everything, there's a big intro for this episode. We're going to kick off the top 10 ways to be an asset to a comedy scene, including never having comedy beef, always being welcoming to newcomers, and supporting other comics and not being a heckler. And then we got interviews with some of the Jersey Shore's finest comics, most notably Joe Borzotta, Eric Hollerbach, and Mollie Sperduto. Let's go. Stand Up and Laugh. Build a comedy scene, produce your own shows, and create community by Angelo Gingerelli is available now on microcosmpublishing.com. If you're trying to make your way in the world of stand-up comedy, you can build your career while enlivening your local comedy community and mutually supporting your fellow humorists, and you can even have fun while doing it. Angelo Gingerelli shares his hard-won advice for anyone who wants to create a comedy scene from scratch in a smaller community, carve out their unique niche in a larger city full of professional funny people, or anywhere in between. Lots of good tips here for anyone organizing community events, from how to book venues, get publicity, and avoid drama. Also includes great arguments for starting or joining a comedy scene rather than thinking of yourself as a lone wolf, and solid wisdom for being an asset to an existing stand-up community. Stand Up and Laugh by Angelo Gingerelli is available now on microcosmpublishing.com. Top 10 ways to be an asset to a local comedy scene. Part 1. Number 1. No comedy beef. Beef with other comics is stupid. That's it. There's nothing else to say. Almost nothing. If you're battling for a Netflix special with somebody in your immediate peer group, or another comic caused you to lose a 6-figure development deal, you probably have an understandable issue with them. However, in most local scenes, the stakes are not nearly high enough to warrant beef between people in the scene. Holding grudge against other performers is exhausting, limits opportunities, and does nothing for the individuals in the feud or anybody affected by it. This isn't like hip-hop, where a well-timed diss track or social media post generates excitement for a new album. In local comedy scenes, comics not speaking or openly attacking each other only results in awkward conversations with your friends outside of comedy trying to explain a situation they won't understand. Seriously, try explaining that you haven't worked with or spoken to a host for the last 6 months because they gave you a bad introduction at an open mic to a non-comic, and they will be as confused as a senior citizen trying to understand the drama of the Kardashians. This doesn't mean you should be a doormat and be the laughingstock of the community. Letting yourself get punked and bullied by other comics, if something egregious happens, it should be dealt with swiftly and effectively. But long, drawn-out beefs or grudges affect everybody negatively. If there are 20 comics in your area and you can't work with 2 of them because of interpersonal conflicts, you have just reduced your number of possible opportunities by 10%. Success in comedy is hard enough without lowering your odds for foolish reasons. Sure, situations will arise where you will feel slighted, producers will leave you off lineups, podcasts will book other guests before you, and if you stay in the game long enough, eventually you will have issues with venue owners. Engaging in these conflicts and devoting mental capacity or hating other people in your immediate vicinity is a waste of time for everybody. Every minute you spend thinking about another comic or actively plotting against them is a minute not spent writing new material, booking shows, or raising your profile in the local scene. Number 2. Be welcoming to newcomers. There are 3 main reasons everybody should be cool with new performers. First, it's the decent thing to do as a human being. This person is trying something new that most people find terrifying. Making it harder for them doesn't benefit anybody. Secondly, you never know who's going to be the next great stand-up comic. Every working comic had a first open mic experience. Every headliner had a learning period, and every comedy icon was a new guy or girl at one point. Being mean to somebody that will eventually be a player in your scene or on a bigger scale means they probably won't work with you when they start booking shows, have a podcast, or can actually help other comics. Lastly, new comics bring people to shows. It's a sad fact that most comics sell the most tickets very early in their career, or if they're lucky enough to, quote, make it once they are headliners. People in that middle area between being new and being established rarely actually sell tickets and bring people to shows. They don't really have fans yet, and their friends or family have seen them enough times that they ignore their Facebook posts, Instagram pics, and tweets about their shows. New comics have groups of people from their personal life who want to see them perform. Booking these new comics on shows gives them a chance to perform at an event other than an open mic, gives their people a chance to see them on stage, and almost guarantees a few extra tickets sold. Being mean to people in general is pretty lame, but being hostile towards someone trying a new art form that terrifies most people is inexcusable and doesn't benefit anybody. Number 3, always support other comics and never heckle. This basically goes along with no comedy beef and be welcoming to newcomers. But heckling or being belligerent at shows is not acceptable no matter how many cocktails you buy at the bar. Yes, you can have some fun at open mics, and roasts are usually a great time. But calling somebody out for a bad set during a show is just unprofessional and sets a bad tone for the audience that paid to see a good show. A better option is giving each other actual constructive criticism after bad sets to lower the chances of it happening again. Unfortunately, in some comedy scenes, there are way more people willing to embarrass a comic on stage than to actually talk to him or her about what happened and how to avoid it in the future. Dealing with hecklers is a skill any seasoned comic has to develop. Anytime you mix a large group of people that want to have a good time with excessive amounts of alcohol, let's keep it real, you have to be on the edge of hospitalization to get flagged in most comedy clubs. You have a chance of heckling or somebody being disruptive. But this skill should be learned on the road while dealing with actual paying crowds, not from fellow comics who are angry they weren't booked on the show or holding a grudge from a previous situation. One way to work on dealing with hecklers is to have designated, quote, heckler nights at open mics. This is an exercise where people call out insults or act purposely disruptive, and whoever's on stage has to deal with it. It's a fun way to develop a new skill that adds a new twist to break the monotony of open mics. Once, I was at an open mic where a comic was struggling to get any response from the crowd. Another comic yelled some kind of insult from his seat that got a mild response from the somewhat confused audience. As soon as this happened, the host yelled, "Same team," and the room quieted down quickly. These 2 perfectly timed words let everybody know that comics are on the same team, and any kind of heckling hurts the overall show and scene as much as it hurts the one comic being insulted. the Stand Up and Laugh audiobook slash podcast. It interviews some of the best names in comedy. We're talking about Chris Gethard, Jersey's own, host of New Jersey's the World, host of the Chris Gethard Show, host of the Beautiful Anonymous podcast. We got Johnny Brennan from the Jerky Boys, a game changer in the 90s, sold millions of albums of prank calls. We got from Arizona, James Petrogallo and Jimmy Wishman, the host of both the Crime and Sports and the Small Town Murder podcast. From the world of heavy metal, we got Don Jameson. He's been on MTV. He's been on VH1. He's on tour with literally every heavy metal hard rock band you ever heard of. From the Dirty South, we got Manny Garavito and Matthew Hahn. From Jersey again, we got John Paul Rome, one of the finest touring comics to ever come out of the Jersey Shore. From Cleveland, Ohio, we got Jim Tews, made a documentary about Cleveland's comedy scene a couple years ago and been killing it ever since. We got some of the Jersey Shore's finest comics, including Joe Borzotta, Eric Hollerbach, and Mollie Sperduto, all coming to the game from different angles. From Instagram, we got Selena Kopic, the host and the voice behind the NYT Val's Instagram account. And from Comedy Fight Club, we got Matt Maron. The Stand Up and Laugh audiobook slash podcast is available now wherever you listen to podcasts, and Stand Up and Laugh is available right now from microcosmpublishing.com. Welcome back to another interview segment on Stand Up and Laugh from Microcosm Publishing. The book is available now on microcosmpublishing.com, and I'm here with one of my good friends in comedy, Joe Borzotta. We have been working together since about 2018 when I did a show in a gallery he owned for a charity event, and we've just hit it off. We've been working together consistently for the last 3 years at this point. He's owned art galleries, he's owned bars, he's made short films, he's opened and hosted and performed on every kind of comedy show you can imagine at the Jersey Shore, in New York City, and in North Jersey, Hoboken, and Jersey City area. And I want to talk to him today about his background in the art community and why stand-up comedians have so much trouble giving and getting criticism. In some cases, we actually make them better stand-up comics. So, Joe, how's it going tonight?
Going great, man. Thanks for having me here.
No problem. Let's real quick. Obviously, we're friends. We know each other very well. Mm-hmm. Give everybody listening a quick 2 to 3 minute sketch of your comedy background.
It was kind of like I went to art school, like you mentioned before, and I always used to like to perform as a kid. And growing up, I was in band and all this other kind of stuff. And as far as the comedy, I had to get a open heart surgery in 2007. I made a bucket list kind of thing, and doing that was one of them. And I did it a while later. I did a set, and then it was always going to be one and done. I was just like, all right, I checked that off the list. And then you know how it is a couple months later, like comics, you start rolling over your material, and you say, I could have done that better, and maybe I'll try it again. And then from there on in, I just kept going with it and really enjoyed it. Nice.
So with that being said, I want to delve into your background in the visual art world, mm-hmm. right? Because you have a lot of conversations where you go to an open mic if you're a comic, you try a joke out or you try a piece of material out, and it's almost like if you were getting a report card, the only grade comics get is an A or an F, right? You get a laugh, it crushes, you think it's a bulletproof, great piece of material for the rest of your career. Or nobody laughs, you get an F, and you scrap the whole thing, right? Would you agree most of the time, especially when you first start working on a joke, it's not an A or an F. It might be an A, B, C, D, or F, and there's something you can pull. Even if it's an F, you can pull something out of it and change something or move an inflection around or pause somewhere and make it a good joke, right? So why don't we do a better job of giving each other criticism and helping each other out? Because the way I think about it is I have one mind to write a joke and write a punchline or tell a story, whatever it might be. But if I tell a joke in front of 10 of my friends and everybody has feedback, shouldn't that get me better faster? Is that fair?
Yes. There's a lot of similarities between art and comedy for me. And I'm going to kind of address it's going to take a second to explain it, but I think I can put it this way. When you go to art school, you start off with putting your you have what are called crits, which is short for critiques or criticisms. And you bring your work to class, you put it up on a wall, and everybody discusses your work, the teachers and the students. So from day one, when you go to art school, you start to develop this thick skin. And art criticism is just part of the art world. There are people that make a career out of being critics and writing criticism. So it's an ingrained part of it, of being an artist. Now, the similarities are that with stand-up is you're looking at the world the same way an artist does. You're looking at something, you're turning it over and looking at it from all different angles, filtering it through your thoughts and experiences and emotions, and but you're trying to create something funny as opposed to a picture. And I think the difference where criticism comes in is that when you're an artist, you're so used to criticism. And you do ask your friends, hey, I'm working on this new body of work. What do you think? You're always used to giving input into the work. However, the difference is when you finish a painting and you put it on a gallery wall for the public, you're still it's part of you. You're bearing yourself, but you're still one step removed. In other words, you can have a piece hanging in a group show, and you can stand there and listen to people talk about it, and they don't know that you're the artist. However, the difference is when stand-up, you're going up on stage by yourself in that spotlight, and it's immediate. There's no one step removed. So I think that the idea of it's a little bit more personal in a sense.
Right. And two things I want to touch on right now. You said artists develop thicker skin because they're constantly being critiqued, right? And comedians, for the most part, don't have that thicker skin. But would you agree, and I can't speak for the whole world, I can speak for the Jersey Shore, the comedians we deal with have either the thickest bulletproof Batman Dark Knight style armor skin that you could literally say anything about their family, their appearance, and nothing gets to them. Mm-hmm. Or you have people with absolutely paper thin skin. Yeah. There's very little in the middle, right? We've been doing a lot of roast at the Jersey Shore and roast battles. And I've been on stage the last couple of months having people that I consider my friends say the most vile, ignorant things about my appearance, my family, the way I dress, my voice, everything. And it's really fun to me, right? But then there's other comics that you just say like, hey, man, why don't you slow down your delivery a little bit? And they don't want to talk to you for 6 months. Right. It's a weird thing. I think one thing that you've done really well is you I think an open mic is whether it's deserved or not, a kind of hot, for a lot of people, it's a very stressful environment, right? The first 50 mics you go to, you act like the Brighton Bar is Madison Square Garden, right? You've been writing all week, you're trying to memorize everything, it's hard. But I think one thing you did in the fall of 2020, we had a brunch at your house. And it was a Sunday morning to afternoon, right? You supplied food for everybody, and we brought a bunch of comics out in a very low-stress environment. Nobody had to perform, and we got the notebooks out, and we talked, right? And everybody was incredibly frank with each other. Like, I think it's funny when you do X. I think Y is a funny joke, but it's not going to fly in Asbury Park for X reason. And I think the people that were there got better, right? I think I think doing that once a month would be valuable, right? I think it got cold, and then COVID didn't go away that we thought it would when it did. Hopefully this spring and summer we could do some more with that. But I think that idea of like getting together with comics outside of the mic or the club or the show environment is probably a good idea. Would you agree?
Yeah, and the thing I thought was really good about that get-together, which is one of the things I was hoping to accomplish, which I think we did, was not so much to talk about, like, okay, your first drink. There wasn't like a crit of our set. It was more like, what do you think about this? And stuff that comics don't really talk about. How did you feel about this? Like kind of getting beneath the veneer we have with each other. And I think a lot of people, yeah, like you said, they opened up, and it wasn't like a therapy session, but it was more just talking honestly about some things that people maybe don't open up about.
Yeah, and I think like somebody there asked about wearing a hat on stage, right? And somebody way back in the day told me, if you wear a hat on stage with a certain kind of spotlight, no one can see your face. So your facial expressions are completely made invalid at that point, right? So as I shared that with the group, and then it helps some people, because I will wear a hat on stage sometimes myself, or we're outside or whatever it might be. But you got to look at certain rooms and be like, if you're going to be at all expressive, that baseball hat or that fedora is going to kill that to the crowd, right? And that's just something that I was lucky enough, somebody told me very early, and this person that asked about it got to learn it about a year ago. But it's conversations we don't have. Right. I remember one night at Brighton, a young man came. He was brand new to stand up, and he didn't know how to speak into a microphone. Right? He was holding the mic about a foot away from his face. Right? And I was next to the stage because I was hosting, and I heard what he was saying was pretty good, right? For your first time, it wasn't bad, but nobody could hear him, right? So then it was a packed night. There's people everywhere, and I'm chilling, watching the room or whatever. Nobody told this kid to speak into a microphone. So finally, I went up to him, and I was like, listen, man, that was a good first time. Next time we go, this is how you have to speak into the mic, right? And then he's gotten progressively better since then. But that's a thing that if 20 seasoned vets are going to watch a young guy or girl not speak into the mic and not help them, we can't expect the scene to flourish.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. Yeah, it's a combination of things because, like before, we were talking about some people eating thick skin and thin skin. I mean, if you've been doing this for 10 or 15 years and you're doing just really basically doing the mic circuit, you don't want some kid coming up who's done it for 3 months and say, hey, you can make this joke better. You'd be better if this, There's a way to do it. And I'll give a quick example. I was at, Scotty's, Comedy Cove. And this kid, same deal. It was his second time. And he said, this is only my second time. And he did this long joke. He spent about 2 minutes talking about his girlfriend being hangry. When you get hungry when you're angry?
Yep.
But, like, the people who knew what hangry meant were riding with him. The people that didn't were just sitting there. So afterwards, I went up to him and I said, hey, congrats, this is your second time. Good job. And I said, do you mind if I give you one little note? And he goes, no. And I said, before you do the hangry bit, because you spent a lot of time on it, just say what hangry really quick. Hungry means hungry when you're angry. And then you won't have lost half the audience, and they'll go along on that ride with you. And he was like, oh, I didn't even think about that. Thanks. And he was really appreciative. I think that's a good way to approach it.
Yeah, and I think I'm sure there's a younger guy who grew up with the Snickers commercials and hangry is just a part of his vocabulary, right? Where if you're older, you never heard that word before. I think one of the best/worst things about being in a local comedy scene is everybody's got the same frame of reference, right? So if we make a joke about a hotel in Asbury and everybody in the room's seen that hotel, that joke might crush. Go to Pittsburgh and tell that joke and it's me crickets, right? So I think it's this weird thing of like you get really good at writing about specific things and people and places that are not going to work outside of that very small bubble. That being said, I have a blast doing that. I love hyper-local humor. I'm really a fan of it, but I realize there's a ceiling to it, right? I can't go on the road and do that. So that being said, Joe, I really appreciate your time tonight. Shout out your social media and where can we find you online?
Let's see. I'm on Borzotta Arts on Instagram, josephborzotta.com for all my artwork, which is soon going to become Borzotta Arts. I'm on Facebook, and there you go.
And we're back with another interview segment for the Stand Up and Laugh podcast, the companion piece to the audiobook Stand Up and Laugh, available from Microcosm Publishing. Go ahead and get your hard copy at microcosmpublishing.com and listen to this audiobook/podcast wherever you listen to audiobooks/podcast. Tonight we have a very special guest. She's been in a comedy game, I think, a little longer than me at the Jersey Shore, because she was already doing it when I jumped in 2013. She does a ton of charity events, a ton of fundraisers, and puts on a great show for great organizations all across New Jersey. I'm super excited to talk to Mollie Sperduto. Mollie, how are you doing tonight?
Good to be here. Thank you for inviting me to do this, Angelo. Always good to talk to you.
Nice. Yeah, obviously we're in a weird year with the pandemic. We haven't seen each other nearly as much in the last 12 months as we normally would cross paths, just doing what we're doing in the same industry. But let's start off real quick with your comedy or entertainment industry bio. How do you get from not doing anything to running these shows and doing these big time fundraisers and booking headliners like you do today?
So I had, like everyone, pretty much started as a performer. And as I was performing, I was noticing that a lot of the shows that I was performing on were being run by my own peers in the business. And so I gave it a stab myself. I tried to run my own show. And I say show lightly because it was a glorified open mic that happened at 10 p.m. at a dive bar in New Brunswick on Sunday nights. But you get where that's coming from. To me, it was a show. And I realized that I liked doing it and didn't want to stop. And it was really a case of work begets work at that point, because I started promoting this regular room that I had, and there were people that were reaching out to me on Facebook and whatnot going, oh, I didn't know you were running your own shows now. My brother just opened a restaurant. We have a cafe. This guy down the street's looking for blah, blah, blah. So there was a need for it. It was something I like to do. So, and I had also just graduated college at that point, and it was the middle of the recession. So I didn't have a job. So it was just a lot of things falling into the right place at the right time, where I decided I wanted to try to figure out how to make this work. And so I was doing a lot of those like bars, coffee houses, that sort of thing for a while. And I knew in the back of my head, even doing them, that I wanted to do something on a larger scale. And fundraisers always just kind of happened to be a thing that was in my mind as like the goal. And so I was doing, like I said, the coffee houses, the bars and everything for about 3 years, just because work kept falling into my lap. And then when I had cut ties with my last standing venue that I had, because they were planning to close down their shop and move on to bigger and better things, I said I could chase down the next coffee house, or I can stop for a minute and figure out how to make this work for these fundraisers and larger scale events that I want to do. So I did exactly that. I took a few moments to re-strategize and then emerged a couple years later than I planned to, doing it again, because I got distracted by other projects along the way. But that's what brings me to where I am today.
Now, when do you get into the fundraising game? You put on some shows, hundreds of people in the audience, big names on the stage, lighting rigs, setting up your own sound system, stuff like that. How does that happen? How do you get to that level of fundraiser?
The really nice thing, actually, especially for the region that we're in, is that there are nonprofits everywhere. And unlike granted, yes, there are like bars and coffee houses, there's corporate places and everything too, but it's a lot easier to look up nonprofits online and be able to break it down to figure out who would be someone that's viable enough to reach out to. But we are very lucky to have, and beyond just what you would think of with traditional charities, but things like your fire departments are very much volunteer representation around here. And Elks and the traditional clubs like VFW, Knights of Columbus, things like that. And most of them have events halls on site that can seat, hundreds of people. And it's very easy for them to draw in a crowd. And I think it's also because we're close enough to the bigger cities, New York, Philly, that we can bring in talent and put on great events here, but not a lot of people come out here to do those types of events because people assume that they have to flock to the nearest city to do so. So we have a lot of advantages, especially being where we are, to put together those kinds of events at those scales.
When we talk about bringing in that talent from the city or from Philly or from the West Coast, how did you start doing that? Because I've done shows with you where there's been some serious headliners sharing the stage with us. How does that happen for you? How do you make that happen?
That is kind of a stroke of luck. I have kept in touch with people that I've worked with over the years, and really, for me, my strong suit is just relationship building and staying in touch with people. And so that way, if I call on someone that I haven't worked with in 10 years, it's not so weird that I'm reaching out to them. And then when it comes to the more like household name type of headliners, they're also not as intimidating to reach out to as you may think. I mean, some of them, there's too many gatekeepers if the name is big enough. But for a lot of them, you go to their website, there's literally a tab for booking information. Their manager's there. You reach out to them, you say how much, they answer you, and either you can swing it or you can't. But it's like any other transaction, and they treat you like any other serious inquiry. So I think those are the two takeaways. It's just maintaining relationships and don't get intimidated by things that might seem like they're out of your league.
Now, the one question I have before we start to wrap things up is, you own Ginger Ninja Productions. Talk about that a little bit. Talk about why you chose to form an LLC and kind of the good and bad of becoming a business entity as opposed to just a single person putting on shows.
What a lot of people will tell you, and I agree as well, that when you form an LLC, it's really not that much more expensive than if you were to do your business as a sole proprietorship. And B, an LLC protects you, the business, against you, the person. So let's say, heaven forbid, someone wanted to come after you and sue you for something that your business did, then they can only come after your business, and if they clean your business dry, they can't come after you next. So not that I plan to run into any issues with that, but literally every single person that I have spoken to in business consultation or legal or anything like that will tell you to have an LLC.
Where do we find you on social media, and how do we work with Ginger Ninja Productions?
So you can find me on social media. My Facebook page is the most active one right now, Ginger Ninja Productions. It's listed, this whole long thing is Ginger Ninja Productions Comedy and Entertainment. I'm the only Ginger Ninja Productions you'll probably find. You can also check out my website, gingerninjacomedy.com. Anything that's coming up, anything new that's going on, my website pretty much gets updated first. There's also a link there to sign up for my mailing list. I tend to that a little bit more frequently than I tend to my social media. It's 2021 goal to get a little bit better balance with that.
Mollie, thank you very much. Hopefully we're together sooner than later. Best of luck with Ginger Ninja Productions, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Angelo.
Now, for the second part of this episode, we're going to catch up with a stand-up comic that I met at the Jersey Shore a couple years ago, but his experience and his resume is much different than most of my other comedy friends at the Jersey Shore. Most comedy people, you'll find out, they grew up somewhere and have experience in that scene, and then if they're lucky and talented enough, they take those talents to either New York or LA or another quote-unquote comedy city and try to take their game to the next level. This man has experience in 4 very distinct comedy scenes all over the country, which I think is very rare. And we'll talk about what that was like, how these scenes are the same, how they're different, how they could be improved, and what he kind of brought to and what he got out of the 4 scenes he was a part of. He's also a host of the very entertaining The Highway Diary podcast, which goes to 300 episodes deep, and it's been airing for 7 or 8 years at this point. He's had me on twice, and I like to think I'm one of his better interviews, but I'm not totally sure because he's had some great guests on The Highway Diary podcast. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome Eric Hollerbach. Eric, how you doing, man?
Thanks, Angelo Gingerelli.
Nice, man. Yeah, I think maybe I did the intro a little formal because obviously we are friends and have worked together a bunch of times over the last year or so. But that being said, can you give us a quick thumbnail sketch of your comedy bio? Where are you from? How do you get in the game? And then yours is interesting because you moved around so many times. So give us maybe years, dates, places, where you were, when you were doing, what you were doing, how it all worked out to get you here tonight.
Yeah, I'm just a grifter, man. I'm just a vagabond. So, I'm from a little town called Long Valley, New Jersey. When I was 16, I literally phoned the Comedy Cellar, and they had an open mic night. But I had been there 3 or 4 times with my father, maybe illegally, in 2002. He took me in when I was 16, and, I saw the greats of the greats at the Cellar. Dave Attell, Jim Norton, Mitch Hedberg, Patrice O'Neill. Seriously, when I'm 15, 16. And so it blew my mind how funny they were. I mean, your sides would be hurting, laughing so hard, So then I did, I put a bunch of my friends in my mom's minivan maybe 12 times, and because that was what I had to do to perform at the Comedy Cellar. So I did bringer shows at the Cellar, 12 times when I was 16 to 17 years old. In 2002, 2003. Then in 2003, the summer between my senior year, I saw a show at the Upright Citizens Brigade. And I was a big fan of Whose Line Is It Anyway on Comedy Central. So then when at the end of the show at UCB, they said, we teach classes, I signed up for those classes immediately. I started traveling once a week to the Upright Citizens Brigade to start training improv with them. And I had teachers like Chris Gethard and Jackie Clark and Doug Moe and Billy Merritt. And just like but it was a different thing. It was improv. But I could show up and train it like an Olympic athlete is training for, a ski luge or something. Oh, and then I even took a stand-up class before the Upright Citizens Brigade at Gotham Comedy Club. It was taught by Dan Vitale. So I did that before. I was, literally still in high school, and I would go at night to Gotham. And then that summer of 2003, I went to take classes at UCB. I mean, so it's just my desire was just off the charts from that age.
Next I have for you is, I know a great deal about the Jersey Shore comedy scene. I know a little bit about New York City's comedy scene, but you've been to the Jersey Shore, New Orleans, Los Angeles, and Austin, Texas, for a decent amount of time in each one. What did you learn? How would you describe each one of those scenes? And you could start with where you started and just kind of take it chronologically from your start to where we are right now.
Yeah. So before I say this, I want to say that what I've learned, most importantly, is that, especially with this COVID-19 situation, but there's always going to be a situation, whether it's economic or this or that, is that this is a big thing. A city is not a stagnant thing. It's not like every time you go to New Orleans or every time you go to Los Angeles, it's a stagnant thing. Each of these cities evolve, and I think that they peak and they valley. You know, in 1985, Mike Tyson was the greatest boxer in the world, literally the best heavyweight boxer in the world. And I feel like Los Angeles, when I was there, so I moved to Los Angeles in 2009. I went to the new school, and then my girlfriend moved back home, and I kind of chased her out there. I lived there from 2009 to 2014. And it was a great time to live there. I saw the Comedy Store under the reigns of a tyrannical, egotistical, sociopathic dude. And then I saw Adam Egget take it over and completely turn it from a bankrupt, shitty club, from the attitude of the talent manager. The attitude was the only difference. Same club, same address, same everything. Adam Egget took over, bar sales through the roof. And all he did was he was fair to the comics, right? And that's literally, so when I say your attitude either limits the potential of the city you're in or explodes like a renaissance, the potential of the city. I've seen this directly via the Comedy Store on Sunset. So it was an amazing learning lesson for me that I'll take from the rest of my life. But going back, when I moved to LA in 2009, I thought I would get right in with the Upright Citizens Brigade. But I found that I started to get a little disillusioned because I felt that the people that were getting passed at the UCB in 2009 in Los Angeles had credits, TV credits. And not only did they want you to perform there for free, like you didn't get paid to be on a team, but they only put on the people on stage that had Twitter followers. So I started going, wait a minute, you know what I mean? I thought I could get in this club because I have New York credentials at this club, but because I wasn't hired on a TV show, you won't let me through the pearly gates. So that's when I said I want to just do stand-up. So I started only doing stand-up in 2011, like January 2011 until today. I just only have done stand-up, and I've never done improv since, well, maybe one or two times when I got whatever. But when I started doing stand-up in LA in 2011, I definitely had to start from scratch. So then I got fired from a reality show called Nashville Confidential, and the next week it got canceled and it didn't even air, right? So I was working on this reality show. They said, I'm going to make $1,350 a week for 7 months. I said, great. I worked there 3 weeks. I get fired. The show gets canceled the next day. I'm like, God damn it. This city sucks. Like, I can't make money. I was broke. I was like desperate. I was going through the list of all my contacts, trying to get another job, and I just couldn't. So I started looking into grad school, and I got into the University of New Orleans. They gave me the Patrick Udo Foundation Scholarship. They gave me the Privateer Scholarship. And so I said, hell yeah. So I went to New Orleans, kind of trying to scam some scholarships into just like a comedy residency for me. And I literally did stand up 5 to 7 nights a week, except for things like Mardi Gras, where there would not be shows to perform at. But yeah, so then I went there.
And then when COVID hits, you make a very bold decision to take your game to Austin, Texas. How's Austin treating you so far?
Honestly, I love it. The comics are, I mean, now I am hearing, now, okay, let's be fair. I'm 6 weeks into moving to Austin, but I will say they don't get their haunches up. I have this very offensive joke. And I'm even like, I don't know if I should do this joke, but it's so offensive and it's so ridiculous and it gets laughs. And as long as you come there on time with jokes and you're nice and you shake hands and you're not crazy, I think it's fair. It just off jump. It's one of the fairest scenes I've ever seen.
That sounds great to me, man.
Yeah.
I think, it's a place we're hearing about more and more. I think it's really cool. You got down there early and are doing a great job in your first couple of weeks or months down there. That being said, to wrap it up, I really appreciate your time, Eric. Give us your social media and where can we find you on the internet?
Yeah, the best place to find me is erichollerbach.com, EricHollerbach.com. I post all my shows, all my dates are there. I'm doing a lot of podcasts now. Check out the Highway Diary podcast. I'm on Twitter at Eric Hollerbach. You can find me that way. Yeah, erichollerbach.com is the best because it has everything I do. I update that every day.
Awesome, man. Thank you very much. Best of luck down in Austin, and make sure you stop by the Brighton Bar next time we're at the Jersey Shore.
Hell yeah. Thanks, Angelo.